Hey, it's Jared. These last couple of weeks, I've been shooting with both the Leica Q3 and the Leica Q3 4.3. Both of these cameras are great, and I made a video about the original Q3 a while ago and talked about how I just wasn't really able to appreciate and work the camera into the way that I shoot. I have been so used to switching out lenses and shooting fast and just being able to do whatever I want to do with my Sony cameras and having lots of options there. Based on kind of where I'm at with just shooting and where I'm at in life, I liked having a bit more flexibility and being able to change lenses, have cameras that were just really fast and snappy. But when I do have opportunities to slow down and really think about what I'm shooting and spend some time composing a shot and actually taking a deep breath, the Q3 is a fantastic camera. And I've continued to use it occasionally, but the 4.3 is appealing to me because it solves one of the main problems that I had. And that problem is not being able to get close enough to action or whatever I want to capture so that the subject is prominent enough in the image. Now, I don't like to get all up in people's faces or get super close to whatever's going on. I like more of a candid style of capture where I'm capturing moments that are happening. Maybe it's more street photography-esque or something like that, but I don't like getting all up in somebody's face, and I felt like I needed to do that with the 28mm. Now, the difference between 28 and 43mm is not that big of a difference, and one would argue, like, why would Leica come out with a camera that has a lens with a focal length that's so close? They're the exact same cameras as far as form, function, everything on the inside's the same. The only difference is the lens. And many people have talked about the differences between the lenses, so I'm not really going to go into that. I'm here more to talk about my experience and show you some images that I captured. So why is the 4.3 working out so much better for me? Well, it is that little bit of difference that I can get away from the action. I did fear that that 4.3 was going to encroach on my ability to capture landscapes. Like, we want a nice wide lens when we're shooting landscapes, and a 28 works for that. A 43 is getting maybe a little too telephoto for that, or normal focal range for that, and I thought that I might miss out. I did end up taking both of these cameras into Glacier National Park and spent some time capturing images, which we're going to look at, and I have to say, unless you really want a wide angle shot for something, you want a wide angle, then the 4.3 is going to be just fine, and we'll look at some examples there. The actual background on my iPad is an image that I captured with the 4.3 actually in a crop mode, and so I used the crop mode to crop in just a little bit to get a little bit closer to what was happening here in this image. Let's look at the 4.3 images first. Let's start with one of the first images that I captured, which was of my coffee. I went and picked up the camera from the mail center that I get my mail at and set up the camera while enjoying some coffee. This basically the same photo with both the 4.3 and the 2.8. That is what I captured. That was my very first 4.3 image. Then I shot an image of the Black Rifle Coffee Company big sign outside. I got home. There was a sunflower there, so I shot a picture of that. Of course, my dog came out to greet me, so captured a picture of him as well. A couple of different angles there. What blows me away is just the detail in the images. Now, these images have had an edit applied to them. I did spend a little bit of time in Lightroom editing them. I didn't touch anything up. I just made them colors punch a bit more, added a little bit of sharpening, which is stuff that I typically do to my images. And we'll look at some unedited images as well, so you can kind of get an idea of what to expect. This was a crop mode here. I cropped in substantially just to get in close and see what kind of detail we were still able to get, because that has been kind of the saving grace for me on this camera, is knowing that if I do need to get closer and I don't want to physically get closer, I can use the crop mode. Then I went out on my way to Glacier and stopped off at this spot. It was early in the morning, started capturing some images using the crop mode. I don't think this image actually downloaded from Lightroom, and so it's not showing us the original image, it's just showing us a preview image, which that's a thing that frustrates me a bit about Lightroom on the iPad, and I guess the Lightroom mobile version, is that sometimes it's just giving you previews, and it's low resolution enough to make you think that that image is bad until you remember, oh, it's probably just a preview of the image. So this was using the crop mode, and I did get in, and I was able to get in significantly tighter using that. Then I shot this image, which was a tough one because it was so much brighter in the background, but there's lots of detail and everything in the ground here. And what I really love about the Leica is how a lot of the colors were preserved. If I shot this with another camera, it would probably meter and steal too much from the brightness in the background to affect the foreground. Either the color temperature would be off or something would be off about that image. And Leica just seems to do a pretty good job of processing. Yeah, sometimes you have to choose whether you want the shadows or your foreground to be. Yeah, sometimes it prioritizes and might not prioritize exactly what you want. So you have to maybe just learn a little bit about what the camera is doing by practicing and using the camera and looking at your images and seeing how the camera processes those images. But overall, you could just point this camera, either one of these two cameras, at something and hit the shutter, and the image is going to look great. Then I moved on, was just kind of moving through the lodge area at Glacier. This is an unedited image probably. Oh no, actually it is. I must not have finished editing this image. And this image is definitely dark. It was kind of a cloudy day and things were moving through the sky and obscuring the sun at times. And so I was missing out on some light in some instances. Here's another image from the 4.3. This is currently my background on my iPhone just because I love the framing here of the waterfall in the background, or the water coming down, cascading down over the rocks. And it just made for a nice image, and it just looks good as a background. Then I started using some of the crop in features, which obviously, like this one, is not downloaded. Yeah, get the original. It's not downloaded. It's also really dark. I didn't really spend much time with these because I noticed that when you do use those crop modes, you seem to lose some exposure as well. And so you have to make adjustments there. So if you punch in and start to crop in, regardless of what camera you're on, if you're in full manual mode and you start to crop in, you're going to need to make adjustments to your exposure, either open up the aperture, change your shutter speed, change your ISO to compensate. This was me learning that because I hadn't messed with the crop mode too much on the camera. And I took a few pictures and looked and thought, well, those are pretty dark, and moved on, made some changes, and then was able to get the exposure I was looking for. So the 4.3 is just capturing just banger images. These obviously still not the best. I moved over into another spot, but the background here up in the sky just too blown out, not enough detail going on back there. I hung out there and took a couple of shots, played around with the crop mode again, trying to crop in a bit and shoot with like a 90mm, 120mm on the Leica 4.3. A lot of these images haven't downloaded, but I will put some of them up on the screen in high resolution so you can see them. Much better looking image. I mean, obviously there were some cars in the shot, but not a bad image overall. And started using some of the crop modes again, just to see what kind of detail can we get. If I go all the way in 150mm on this little 4.3 camera, can we get good detail? And while these images are lower resolution and also not as sharp as if we were at the full 4.3 focal length, they're very usable, and I'm glad that I have the option. This image is not bad at all. It is a little soft and there are some issues around the edges, but overall I was pretty far away from this mountain, considering this was the 4.3 focal length. And if we look here just to make sure, that's 4.3 focal length. That's how far away we were from that mountain, and I was able to get in that tight on that mountain. But the fact that I can capture that without moving and not have to change lenses or anything is pretty amazing, and still get an image that looks that good. It's not perfect, but it does look pretty good. This is a challenging location because the sky was really lit up and this area was actually pretty dark. So I tried to boost the exposure here in Lightroom because the original image looks like this. There just wasn't any information left in the sky. And so this image definitely didn't work out, but I left it in just because you're gonna run into situations like that. And you're gonna have a shot where you're gonna wanna try and pull detail back into an area. And sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not. Here's another shot, same type of situation. That last image was shooting up this way. I turned and shot this way. A little bit better, but still not a very exciting image. Another shot where the sky was very well lit. Sun was up here pointing in my direction. And so not the best image. I mean, it is a beautiful location. If I had been there at like 4 p.m. instead, this would have been a much better image. And I tried the crop mode just to see if I could get in a little bit tighter and solve the problem by not including the sky. But there was just too much like atmosphere in the sky, and the camera was capturing that, and it was softening my image. And then of course, as I cropped in even more, the problem got worse and worse until I decided to move on. This shot I really do like. There's just a lot going on here. A lot of mountains kind of all coming together. Here's the road that we were traveling down. Very bright colors, very fall, autumn going on over here, where everything else is a bit more subdued. There's a bit of that going on back here, but it's off in the distance, and it also doesn't have any sun on it as well, so it's a little bit trickier of an area, and obviously the sun was really lighting up the mountain in the back. And so tried to balance this image. There are definitely some things that I wish I could change about it, Perhaps the time of day would have made a big difference, but overall, not bad. Another shot with the 4.3, more shots with the 4.3 as we're just kind of zooming through some of these. And I'm getting to the end of my day. I think this was the last image with the 4.3. So let's actually take a look at the images from the 2.8, and we'll start back with that coffee image. So here's a situation where you can see a substantial difference between the 2.8 and the 4.3. That 4.3 was such a tighter crop with this same exact image sitting in the same exact position, holding the camera in the same spot. So definitely a drastic difference here. So when you're shooting things that are close up, big difference between these two focal lengths. But things start to change, of course, with big landscapes. A lot more of the Black Rifle logo here. Now, I didn't even edit this image, so this one's not edited at all. This is straight out of camera. Also straight out of camera with the sunflower here. Would have been a lot more tighter of a shot with the 4.3 than the 2.8. Grab some photos of the dog. Obviously, the 2.8 takes us back, gives us more to see, and the 4.3 really shines at getting me in closer without having to put the camera right in, say, my dog's face or anybody else's face for that matter. So this is where the 4.3 I think really starts to shine, is when you want to capture things, but you don't want to be all up in somebody's business to capture them. This is a crop mode on the 2.8. Trying to get in tight. You can see it's a bit soft, definitely not as sharp of an image. This is the 2.8 in a crop as well. Let's just double check. I was trying to get in tight and replicate what I could get with the 4.3, but this image definitely is pretty soft. Something feels weird and off about this side of the image, and definitely there's a lot that I don't like going on with the ridge here. It has to do with the sun being back there, but it also has to do with probably the processing that's happening with that artificial crop that I did in the camera. And then here's more of what the 2.8 was capturing. And then I started going backwards on the crop. And then here's the actual view of the 2.8, quite a bit further back of the wide shot. And so, yeah, you can get in pretty close using the crop mode on the 2.8. But I found that the crop mode on the 2.8 seems to be a bit softer than the 4.3. And I'm sure it's most likely because it's taking such a wide frame and trying to crop in and get in tighter. And so there's some distortion it has to account for and some different things there. I'm sure that it doesn't have to deal with the 4.3. So far, I found those in-camera crop modes seem to do a bit better on the 4.3 than the 2.8. Now we're getting into Glacier National Park and seeing some of those shots. This is at 28 millimeters, another couple of shots at 28 millimeters. Definitely just a lot more. You're starting to see how big of a difference the 4.3 and the 28 millimeter are. Here's a good example. Like this shot, there's too much going on, and the point of interest in this shot is just so small in the middle. And yeah, I probably could have used the crop mode on the 28 millimeter and tried to get in tighter, but it just wouldn't work out and give me as good of a quality image as the 4.3 would. The 43 millimeter definitely shines in this situation where the 28 is just too wide. And here's where I tried to get in really close with the crop mode on the 28 millimeter. And not only did I lose a lot of sharpness, but I also lost a lot of exposure as well. And those images suffered because of it. And while it's great that I could get in this close with the 28 millimeter, these images to me just are not really useful. And you really start to see your exposure suffer as well. And so you have to stay on top of that or be shooting in shutter aperture priority so that your camera's automatically compensating. Here's that wide angle, but in a landscape crop. And you can see I've got people up here. I'm just too far away. There's so much going on in this image that I can't even really tell what's going on in the middle. And this image was a little bit overexposed anyways. Now down here in this spot that was a little challenging because of all of this atmosphere here taking away from the blue sky, and you can see here's where it ends. It's nice that with the 28 millimeter I was able to get enough to see, oh, there is some blue sky up there, but it's still not a great shot, not very interesting. While this is still a decent image, I'm starting to lose detail, I'm starting to lose exposure. Then as I get in even closer, I'm definitely losing a lot of detail there. That 28 millimeter, I mean, even though this shot has a lot wrong with it, I love it because it's just a great image from the side of the road. I mean, everything is small in the background. It definitely makes things look like I was far away from them. But when you're out shooting stuff with the 28 millimeter, that's what you're going to get. Things are going to look far away unless you get up close. Then using the crop mode, I'm trying to use the crop mode and get in tight. I'm losing lots of detail. I've got sharpness issues along the ridges, and the image just falls apart. And so one of the main things that I was trying to figure out in testing both of these cameras is, can I just use the 28 millimeter camera, the original Q3, but crop in more and try to get what I could get with the 4.3? Because I'd hate to choose the 4.3 and then sacrifice that wider angle focal length that the 28 millimeter offers me. But I just couldn't come to that conclusion. The 28 millimeter being a fantastic focal length and a fantastic lens, and here I'm just shooting those same images, trying to do the same crop, figuring things out, trying to see if crop is going to work and it's not. But in returning to the idea of the 4.3 versus the 28mm, I land on the 43mm time and time again, because everything that I shoot seems to just be better with the 43mm, because that focal length resonates and works better with me. And so as I'm showing you these shots that are 28mm, everything is just so much smaller. That mountain in the background, smaller. Everything is kind of coming in and bringing things together. And I'm also losing a little bit of compression there as well because of the 28mm. Here's another image, but I was using a crop mode trying to get close to what the 4.3 would offer. And so obviously there's like some sharpness issues and stuff in this image because I was trying to force the camera to capture at a different focal length, and I just continued trying to shoot different images using crop modes, not using crop modes with the 28mm, and that was the last image that I captured with the Leica Q3. So let's bring all of this together into a final statement. I honestly think that the 4.3 is a better overall option for me, and maybe even for most people, but it really does depend on what you're wanting to shoot. If you find yourself using a wide angle lens quite often, the 28mm is going to be the better option because you get that wider angle, and yeah, you can crop in artificially to 35mm or maybe punch in even one more and get close to what the 43mm can do natively. But even if for an instance you think that you might want to get a little bit closer to the action that's taking place, you find yourself not wanting a super wide angle as your default for your camera, then the 4.3 I think is the better option. I've been shooting with the Short Stash Everyday filter, which is part polarizer filter and also a black mist combo, which I think adds a really neat look to the image. And unfortunately, you can't use it with the Leica cap or anything. You just have to put an old school cap on there, which is fine. But I really like the look that this filter produces. I also have this same filter set in 67 and 77mm that I've been using on my Sonys for the last couple of months. So which one of these cameras you choose is really a personal decision, and you have to make that decision based on the focal length that you think is going to make the most sense for you. Personally, I find myself with my other cameras shooting with a 35mm, a 50mm, an 85mm, or some sort of zoom that covers that entire range. With that said, I don't find myself very often shooting at 28mm, and I think that's one of the reasons that I struggled initially with the Q3, is that it was just too wide and it left me wanting longer focal lengths. So what are your thoughts on the Leica Q3 and the Leica Q3 4.3? Which do you think is the best option for you? Maybe you have thoughts or an opinion that I didn't land on in this video. I'd love to talk about it down in the comment section below. I think the beautiful thing about photography is that all of us see things slightly differently, and we'd likely choose different options based on what we like and what we see. And so being exposed to different perspectives definitely helps me grow as a photographer. So let's talk about it down in the comment section below. If you're thinking about picking one of these up, using the links in the description helps support the channel. But another way you can support the channel is by clicking that thumbs up, subscribing, and coming back and seeing me in another video.